Maria stood in front of the old mirror in her bedroom, staring at her reflection. The black dress she wore had become like a second skin over the past 6 months. Every morning she would wake up and for just a brief moment, forget that Carlos was gone. Then reality would crash down on her like a wave, reminding her that she was now alone with 2 children and a pile of bills that seemed to grow taller each day. Her hands trembled slightly as she tried to fix her hair. Today was different. Today was her first day at Villa Industries, one of the biggest manufacturing companies in the city. She had heard about this place for years. People said if you got a job there, you were set for life. Good pay, benefits, and most importantly, stability. That was what Maria needed more than anything right now. Carlos had died in a construction accident 6 months ago. One moment he was there, laughing at breakfast, kissing the kids goodbye. The next moment he was gone. The company he worked for gave her some compensation, but it wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. The rent kept coming, the electricity bill, the water, food for growing children who seemed to eat more every day. Her savings had dried up faster than she ever imagined possible. Her neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, had been the one who told her about the opening at Villa Industries. Mrs. Rodriguez's son worked in the shipping department there, and he had put in a good word for Maria. The interview had been tough. The manager who interviewed her, a middle-aged man with cold eyes, had asked her pointed questions about her situation. "Can you handle pressure?" he had asked. "Can you work long hours if needed? We don't tolerate weakness here." Maria had nodded, desperate for the opportunity. She told him she could handle anything. She needed this job. Her 8-year-old daughter needed new shoes. Her 10-year-old son needed books for school. She needed to keep the roof over their heads. Now, standing in front of that mirror, Maria took a deep breath. She thought about Carlos, about how proud he would be that she was doing this. He always said she was stronger than she knew. She hoped he was right. The bus ride to Villa Industries took 40 minutes. Maria sat near the window, watching the city wake up around her. Street vendors were setting up their stalls. Shop owners were rolling up their shutters. Other workers, just like her, were heading to their jobs with tired eyes and determined faces. She wondered how many of them were carrying burdens like hers. When she finally arrived at the factory gates, Maria felt her breath catch in her throat. The building was huge, much bigger than she had imagined. The Villa Industries logo gleamed in the morning sun, bright red letters against white concrete. Guards stood at the entrance, checking IDs and badges. Everything looked so official, so important. Maria walked through the gates along with dozens of other workers. Some of them chatted with each other, clearly friends who had worked together for years. Others, like Maria, walked alone, their eyes fixed straight ahead. She clutched her bag tightly, feeling like a small fish in a very big pond. The HR department was on the 2nd floor. A young woman with tired eyes handed Maria her badge, uniform, and a thick packet of papers. "Read through the employee handbook," she said without much emotion. "Your supervisor will be Roberto Vasquez. Report to Section C on the main floor." "Don't be late," Maria nodded and hurried to the changing room. The uniform was stiff and uncomfortable, but she didn't care. She was officially an employee of Villa Industries now, a floor supervisor no less. It was more than she had hoped for. As she made her way to Section C, Maria noticed the atmosphere of the place. It was loud, with machines humming and beeping constantly. Workers moved quickly, efficiently, like parts of a larger machine themselves. Nobody smiled much. Everyone seemed focused, almost afraid to slow down. She found Section C at the far end of the factory floor. About 30 workers were already there, standing near their stations. They all turned to look at her when she approached, their faces curious but guarded. Before Maria could introduce herself, a loud voice boomed across the floor. "You must be the new supervisor." Maria turned to see a large man walking toward her. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a thick mustache and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "This must be Roberto Vasquez, her boss." "Yes, sir," Maria said, extending her hand. "I'm Maria Torres." Roberto looked at her hand for a moment before shaking it briefly. His grip was strong, almost painful. "I'm Roberto Vasquez, the manager here. Let me make something clear from the start. I run a tight ship. We have production targets to meet, and we meet them. No excuses, no complaints. You understand?" "Yes, sir, I understand." "Good, your job is to keep these workers moving. Make sure they're hitting their numbers. If someone is slacking, you report to me immediately. If there's a problem, you fix it. If you can't fix it, you come to me. But don't come to me with problems unless you've tried to solve them first. I don't have time for hand-holding. Maria nodded, feeling a knot form in her stomach. Roberto's tone was harsh, his manner intimidating. But she reminded herself that she needed this job. She could handle a tough boss. She had to. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. Maria learned the names of the workers in her section, studied the production process, and tried to understand the complex system of targets and quotas. Everyone worked quickly, barely stopping to catch their breath. She noticed that whenever Roberto walked by, people seemed to tense up, working even faster, avoiding his gaze. During the lunch break, Maria sat alone in the cafeteria. She had brought food from home, simple rice and beans, trying to save every penny she could. As she ate, she watched the other workers. Some laughed and joked with each other. Others sat silently like her, lost in their own thoughts. An older woman with gray hair sat down across from Maria. "You're new," she said with a kind smile. "I'm Lucia. I work in packaging." "Maria," she replied, grateful for the friendly face. "It's my first day." Lucia nodded knowingly. "I've been here for 12 years. Let me give you some advice. Keep your head down, do your work, and stay out of Roberto's way. That man has a temper like you wouldn't believe." Maria felt her stomach tighten again. "Is he really that bad?" Lucia's smile faded. "Just be careful, that's all I'm saying. Villa Industries is a good company, good pay, but some of the managers here think they own you. Roberto is one of them." Before Maria could ask more, the lunch break ended. Workers began filing back to their stations. Maria returned to Section C, her mind racing with questions and doubts. But she pushed them aside. She had children to feed. She had bills to pay. She could handle whatever came her way. As the day ended and Maria left the factory, she felt exhausted, but also something else. Hope. Maybe not the bright, shining hope she had felt on her wedding day, or when her children were born, but a small, stubborn hope that she could make this work, that she could provide for her family, that she could survive. She didn't know then that this job would test her in ways she never imagined, that within months her life would change forever, that standing up for what was right would cost her more than she ever thought possible. But for now, on this first day, Maria Torres walked out of those factory gates with her head held high, ready to face whatever tomorrow would bring. Maria's first week at Villa Industries passed like a strange dream. Every day she learned something new about the factory, about the people, and most importantly, about Roberto Vasquez. What she learned made her stomach turn. It was Wednesday morning when Maria first saw Roberto's true nature. She had arrived early, wanting to make a good impression. The factory floor was still quiet, with only a few workers preparing their stations for the day. Maria was reviewing the production reports from the previous day when she heard shouting from the far end of the floor. "What kind of idiots do they hire here?" The voice was Roberto's, loud and angry. "Look at this mess. Look at it." Maria turned to see Roberto standing over an elderly man named Felipe. Felipe was the janitor, a gentle soul who had worked at Villa Industries for over 20 years. He was bent over, trying to clean up what looked like spilled oil near one of the machines. His hands shook as he worked. "I'm sorry, sir," Felipe said quietly. "The container was leaking. I was just trying to clean it up before anyone slipped." "You're always making excuses," Roberto shouted, his face red with anger. "This is the third time this week I've seen a mess in this area." "Third time? Are you stupid? Are you too old to do your job properly?" Other workers had started arriving, and they all stopped to watch. Nobody said anything. Nobody moved to help Felipe. They just watched, their faces carefully blank, as if this was something they had seen many times before. Maria felt anger rising in her chest. This wasn't right. Felipe was doing his job, trying to prevent an accident, and Roberto was humiliating him in front of everyone for it. Maybe if you spent less time taking coffee breaks and more time actually working, this factory wouldn't look like a garbage dump, Roberto continued. "I should fire you right now. Give your job to someone who actually wants to work." Felipe's shoulders sagged. The old man looked broken, defeated. He mumbled another apology and continued cleaning, moving even faster now, his hands trembling more than before. Roberto finally walked away, still muttering angrily. As he passed Maria, he noticed her watching. "What are you looking at?" he snapped. "Don't you have work to do?" "Yes, sir," Maria said quietly, turning back to her reports. but her hands were shaking with anger and something else. Fear. If Roberto could treat a man like Felipe that way, a man who had worked here for 2 decades, what would he do to her if she ever made a mistake? Later that day, during her lunch break, Maria sat with Lucia again. The older woman could see the distress on Maria's face. "You saw what happened with Felipe this morning," Lucia said. It wasn't a question. Maria nodded. "How can he treat people like that? Why doesn't anyone report him?" Lucia sighed deeply. "People have tried, believe me. But Roberto has connections. His cousin married into the Villa family. Eduardo Villa himself, the owner, treats Roberto like family. Anyone who complains either gets fired or gets transferred to the worst positions in the company. People learn to keep quiet. That's not right," Maria said. "No, it's not," Lucia agreed. "But that's how things work here. Roberto has been like this for years. He thinks screaming and threatening people makes them work harder. And maybe it does for a while. But mostly it just makes people afraid." Over the following days, Maria witnessed more of Roberto's behavior. She saw him throw a clipboard at a young worker who had made a mistake on a form. She heard him call a woman useless because she asked for clarification on a new procedure. She watched him dock a man's pay because he was 5 minutes late, even though the man's child had been sick. The worst part was seeing how people reacted. They had learned to avoid Roberto, to make themselves small and invisible when he was around. They worked in constant fear, always looking over their shoulders, always worried that they would be his next target. Maria tried to be different. She tried to be kind to the workers in her section, to encourage them instead of threaten them, but she also felt Roberto's eyes on her, watching, waiting for her to make a mistake. The pressure was enormous. One afternoon, Roberto called Maria into his office. She went with her heart pounding, wondering what she had done wrong. "Sit down," he said. Not looking up from his paperwork, Maria sat, her hands folded in her lap. "Your section's numbers are good," Roberto finally said. "Production is up 3% from last month. That's acceptable." "Thank you, sir. But don't think that means you can relax," he continued, finally looking at her. "I've been watching you. You're too soft with the workers, too friendly. They're not your friends, Torres. They're here to work and you're here to make sure they work. Remember that." "I understand, sir. But I believe people work better when they're treated with respect." "I don't care what you believe," Roberto interrupted, his voice rising. "I care about results. And if you want to keep this job, if you want to keep feeding those children of yours, you'll do things my way. Is that clear?" The mention of her children felt like a punch to Maria's gut. How did he know about them? Had he looked into her file? Was he threatening her? "Yes, sir," Maria said quietly. "It's clear. Good, now get back to work." Maria left his office feeling sick. She went to the bathroom and locked herself in a stall, taking deep breaths, trying not to cry. She thought about her children, about the bills waiting at home, about how desperately she needed this job. Could she really work for a man like Roberto? Could she stand by and watch him destroy people's dignity day after day? That evening, Maria called her sister on her way home. Her sister, Beatriz, had always been her closest confidant. "He sounds terrible," Beatriz said after hearing about Roberto. "But Maria, you need this job." "You can't afford to lose it, I know," Maria said. "But B, you should see how he treats people. It's cruel. It's wrong." "Life is cruel sometimes," Beatriz said gently. "You know that better than anyone. Just keep your head down. Do your work. Don't get involved in other people's problems. You have enough of your own." Maria knew her sister was right. The practical thing to do was to stay quiet, to focus on her own survival. But every night when she came home and hugged her children, she thought about the other workers at the factory. Many of them had children too. Many of them were struggling just like her, and they were all trapped under Roberto's cruel management. The second week turned into the third and then the fourth. Maria settled into a routine, but she never felt comfortable. The factory floor felt like a battlefield with Roberto as the enemy everyone feared. She saw good workers make small mistakes and get torn apart verbally. She saw people work through lunch because they were too afraid to take breaks. She saw the toll that constant fear and stress took on people's faces, their posture, their spirit. One day, a young woman in Maria's section named Isabel was working at her station when she suddenly stopped. She put her head down on the table and started crying. Maria hurried over. "Isabel, what's wrong?" The young woman looked up, her eyes red. "My daughter is sick. She's been running a fever for 2 days. I need to take her to the doctor, but if I miss work again, Roberto said he'll fire me." I don't know what to do. Maria felt her heart break. Isabel was a single mother, just 23 years old, trying to raise a 4-year-old daughter on her own. She reminded Maria of herself in many ways. Go, Maria said firmly. Take your daughter to the doctor. I'll handle Roberto. But he'll be so angry. Let me worry about that. Your daughter needs you. Go. Isabel hesitated, then grabbed her bag and hurried out. Maria watched her go, already dreading the confrontation that was coming. Because Roberto would find out. He always did. And when he did, Maria knew there would be consequences. She just didn't know how severe those consequences would be. She didn't know that standing up for Isabel would be the beginning of everything that would follow, that in trying to protect another mother, she would set in motion events that would change her life forever. For now, Maria just went back to work, checking on the other workers in her section, trying to keep everything running smoothly, trying to be the kind of supervisor she would have wanted when she was just starting out, trying to hold on to her humanity in a place that seemed determined to strip it away. The factory machines hummed around her, loud and relentless, drowning out everything else, just like Roberto's voice, just like the fear that hung in the air, just like the injustice that everyone could see but nobody dared to challenge. Not yet. The days after the meeting felt like walking through a minefield. Maria came to work each morning with her stomach in knots, knowing that Roberto was watching her every move. True to his word, he was always there, hovering at the edge of her vision, waiting for her to make a mistake. For 2 weeks, Maria was careful. She double-checked every report, every number, every decision. She stayed late, came in early, did everything perfectly, but she knew it was only a matter of time. Roberto wasn't going to let her embarrassment of him go unpunished. He was just waiting for the right moment. That moment came on a Thursday afternoon. Maria was in her section, helping one of the workers fix a jammed machine. It was routine maintenance, nothing major. She had her back turned, focused on the work, when she heard Roberto's voice behind her. Torres, my office now. Maria's heart sank. She wiped her hands on a cloth and followed him, aware of every eye on the factory floor watching them. The walk to his office felt familiar now, but no less terrifying. When they reached his office, Roberto didn't even wait for the door to close completely before he started. Do you think you're clever? He demanded. Do you think I don't see what you're doing? I don't know what you mean, sir, Maria said honestly. I've been doing my job. My section's numbers are good. I haven't caused any problems. That's exactly the problem, Roberto said, moving closer to her. You're too good. Your section loves you. The other workers keep talking about you, about how you stood up for Isabel, about how you're different from the other supervisors. You're making me look bad by comparison. That's not my intention. I don't care about your intentions, Roberto shouted. I care about respect. I care about authority. And you undermined both when you challenged me in that meeting. I was defending someone who deserved to be defended, Maria said, trying to keep her voice calm even though her hands were shaking. That's all. No, that's not all, Roberto said, his voice dropping to something cold and dangerous. You made a fool of me in front of the other managers. You questioned my authority, and now you need to pay for that. Maria felt her pulse quicken. What do you mean? I'm writing you up, Roberto said, pulling a form from his desk drawer. Insubordination, challenging management decisions, creating a hostile work environment. That's not true, Maria protested. I haven't done any of those things. I've been doing my job exactly as I'm supposed to. It's my word against yours, Roberto said with a cruel smile. And who do you think they'll believe? A manager who's been here 15 years or a widow who's been here 3 months? Maria stared at him, understanding finally settling in. This wasn't about her job performance. This was about punishment. This was about Roberto showing everyone, that you don't challenge him without consequences. This isn't right, Maria said, her voice trembling now. You know this isn't right. Sign the form, Roberto ordered, pushing it across the desk toward her. No, Maria said. I won't sign something that's a lie. Roberto's face turned dark red. You're refusing a direct order? I'm refusing to accept false accusations, Maria said, standing her ground even though every instinct told her to run. If you want to write me up, do it. But I won't sign it. I won't agree that I did something wrong when I didn't. The tension in the room was explosive. Roberto stood there, breathing heavily, his hands clenched into fists. Maria could see the anger radiating off him like heat. She had seen this anger before, directed at other people, But now it was focused entirely on her. "You just made a huge mistake," Roberto said quietly. "The biggest mistake of your life." Before Maria could respond, before she could move, Roberto stepped forward and struck her across the face. The slap was so sudden, so unexpected that Maria didn't even have time to raise her hands. The force of it knocked her sideways and she stumbled, catching herself on the edge of the desk. Her cheek burned with pain and she could taste blood in her mouth. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Maria stood there, one hand on her throbbing cheek, unable to believe what had just happened. Roberto had hit her. Her boss had actually hit her. "You need to learn your place," Roberto said, his voice shaking with rage. "You need to understand that women like you, widows with kids and bills, don't get to talk back to men like me. You're nothing. You're replaceable. And if you ever embarrass me again, if you ever question my authority again, it'll be worse than a slap. Much worse." Maria looked up at him, tears streaming down her face now, though whether from pain or shock or rage, she couldn't tell. She wanted to scream, to fight back, to run, but her body felt frozen. "Get out of my sight," Roberto ordered. "And if you know what's good for you, if you care about keeping your job and feeding your children, you'll forget this ever happened. You'll go back to work, keep your head down, and never speak against me again." Maria somehow made her legs move. She walked to the door, her hand still pressed against her burning cheek. As she reached for the doorknob, Roberto spoke again. "And Torres? If you try to report this, nobody will believe you. I'll say you attacked me first. I'll say you're unstable, that you've been acting erratic since your husband died. Who do you think they'll believe? A respected manager or a desperate widow?" Maria opened the door and walked out, not trusting herself to speak. The hallway was empty, thank goodness. She couldn't bear anyone seeing her like this. She went straight to the bathroom and locked herself in a stall. Only then did she let herself fall apart. She cried silently, pressing her hand against her mouth to muffle the sobs. Her face throbbed with pain. When she finally emerged from the stall and looked in the mirror, she could see the red mark on her cheek, already beginning to darken into a bruise. Her lip was split slightly, bleeding. Maria ran cold water over her hands and pressed them against her face, trying to reduce the swelling. But she knew there was no hiding this. People would see. People would ask questions. What would she tell them? The truth? That her boss had hit her? Roberto was right about one thing. Who would believe her? He was connected to the Villa family. He had power, influence, and years of loyalty to the company. She was nobody, just another worker who could be replaced tomorrow. Maria thought about her children waiting for her at home, about the bills that needed to be paid, about how hard it had been to find this job, and how much harder it would be to find another one if she got fired. But as she stared at her bruised reflection in the mirror, Maria made a decision. She wouldn't forget this. She wouldn't pretend it didn't happen. And she certainly wouldn't let Roberto get away with it. Maybe nobody would believe her. Maybe she would lose her job. Maybe trying to fight back would destroy everything she had left. But if she stayed silent, if she let this violence go unreported, then Roberto would do it again. To her or to someone else. And she couldn't live with that. Maria cleaned herself up as best she could, then left the bathroom. She walked past her section without stopping. Ignoring the concerned looks from her workers, she went straight to the HR department on the second floor. The same tired-looking woman who had given Maria her badge on the first day looked up as she entered. Her eyes widened when she saw Maria's face. "I need to file a report," Maria said, her voice surprisingly steady. "I need to report an incident of workplace violence." The woman hesitated, her eyes darting to Maria's bruised cheek and then to the phone on her desk, as if wondering whether to call security. "What happened?" "My manager, Roberto Vasquez, hit me in his office about 20 minutes ago," Maria said. "I want to file a formal complaint." The woman's expression changed. Maria saw pity there and something else. Fear maybe, or resignation. "Let me get you the forms," she said quietly. As Maria sat down to fill out the paperwork, her hands still trembling, she wondered if she was doing the right thing. She wondered if this would lead to justice or just to more pain. But she thought about Isabel crying in that conference room. She thought about Felipe, the old janitor, being humiliated over spilled oil. She thought about all the other workers living in fear every day, and she kept writing. She documented everything that had happened, every word Roberto had said, the violence he had used. She was as detailed and specific as she could be. When she finished, she signed her name at the bottom of the form and handed it to the HR woman. "What happens now?" Maria asked. The woman looked at the form, then at Maria, then sighed. "Now we wait. The company will investigate. They'll talk to you, to Roberto, to anyone who might have seen or heard something. But I have to be honest with you. These things are complicated, especially when it involves someone with Roberto's connections." Maria nodded. She had expected as much. But at least she had tried. At least she had refused to be silent. She left the HR office and went back to work, finishing out her shift even though her face ached and her spirit felt crushed. When she finally clocked out and left the factory that evening, Maria didn't go straight home. She went to a clinic and had a doctor examine her face. She got the bruising documented, photographed. She got everything in writing. Because Roberto might have power, but Maria had the truth, and she was going to hold on to that truth no matter what came next. The days after the meeting felt like walking through a minefield. Maria came to work each morning with her stomach in knots, knowing that Roberto was watching her every move. True to his word, he was always there, hovering at the edge of her vision, waiting for her to make a mistake. For 2 weeks, Maria was careful. She double-checked every report, every number, every decision. She stayed late, came in early, did everything perfectly, but she knew it was only a matter of time. Roberto wasn't going to let her embarrassment of him go unpunished. He was just waiting for the right moment. That moment came on a Thursday afternoon. Maria was in her section, helping one of the workers fix a jammed machine. It was routine maintenance, nothing major. She had her back turned, focused on the work when she heard Roberto's voice behind her. "Torres, my office now." Maria's heart sank. She wiped her hands on a cloth and followed him, aware of every eye on the factory floor watching them. The walk to his office felt familiar now, but no less terrifying. When they reached his office, Roberto didn't even wait for the door to close completely before he started. "Do you think you're clever?" he demanded. "Do you think I don't see what you're doing?" "I don't know what you mean, sir," Maria said honestly. "I've been doing my job. My section's numbers are good. I haven't caused any problems." "That's exactly the problem," Roberto said, moving closer to her. "You're too good. Your section loves you. The other workers keep talking about you, about how you stood up for Isabel, about how you're different from the other supervisors. You're making me look bad by comparison. That's not my intention." "I don't care about your intentions," Roberto shouted. "I care about respect. I care about authority. And you undermined both when you challenged me in that meeting." "I was defending someone who deserved to be defended," Maria said, trying to keep her voice calm even though her hands were shaking. "That's all." "No, that's not all," Roberto said, his voice dropping to something cold and dangerous. "You made a fool of me in front of the other managers. You questioned my authority, and now you need to pay for that." Maria felt her pulse quicken. "What do you mean?" "I'm writing you up," Roberto said, pulling a form from his desk drawer. "Insubordination. Challenging management decisions. Creating a hostile work environment. That's not true," Maria protested. "I haven't done any of those things. I've been doing my job exactly as I'm supposed to." "It's my word against yours," Roberto said with a cruel smile. "And who do you think they'll believe? A manager who's been here 15 years or a widow who's been here 3 months? Maria stared at him, understanding finally settling in. This wasn't about her job performance. This was about punishment. This was about Roberto showing everyone that you don't challenge him without consequences. "This isn't right," Maria said, her voice trembling now. "You know this isn't right. Sign the form," Roberto ordered, pushing it across the desk toward her. "No," Maria said. "I won't sign something that's a lie." Roberto's face turned dark red. "You're refusing a direct order." "I'm refusing to accept false accusations," Maria said, standing her ground even though every instinct told her to run. "If you want to write me up, do it. But I won't sign it. I won't agree that I did something wrong when I didn't." The tension in the room was explosive. Roberto stood there, breathing heavily, his hands clenched into fists. Maria could see the anger radiating off him like heat. She had seen this anger before, directed at other people, but now it was focused entirely on her. "You just made a huge mistake," Roberto said quietly. "The biggest mistake of your life." Before Maria could respond, before she could move, Roberto stepped forward and struck her across the face. The slap was so sudden, so unexpected that Maria didn't even have time to raise her hands. The force of it knocked her sideways and she stumbled, catching herself on the edge of the desk. Her cheek burned with pain and she could taste blood in her mouth. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Maria stood there, one hand on her throbbing cheek, unable to believe what had just happened. Roberto had hit her. Her boss had actually hit her. "You need to learn your place," Roberto said, his voice shaking with rage. "You need to understand that women like you, widows with kids and bills, don't get to talk back to men like me. You're nothing. You're replaceable. And if you ever embarrass me again, if you ever question my authority again, it'll be worse than a slap. Much worse." Maria looked up at him, tears streaming down her face now, though whether from pain or shock or rage, she couldn't tell. She wanted to scream, to fight back, to run. But her body felt frozen. "Get out of my sight," Roberto ordered. "And if you know what's good for you, if you care about keeping your job and feeding your children, you'll forget this ever happened. You'll go back to work, keep your head down, and never speak against me again." Maria somehow made her legs move. She walked to the door, her hand still pressed against her burning cheek. As she reached for the doorknob, Roberto spoke again. "And Torres, if you try to report this, nobody will believe you. I'll say you attacked me first. I'll say you're unstable, that you've been acting erratic since your husband died. Who do you think they'll believe? A respected manager or a desperate widow?" Maria opened the door and walked out, not trusting herself to speak. The hallway was empty, thank goodness. She couldn't bear anyone seeing her like this. She went straight to the bathroom and locked herself in a stall. Only then did she let herself fall apart. She cried silently, pressing her hand against her mouth to muffle the sobs. Her face throbbed with pain. When she finally emerged from the stall and looked in the mirror, she could see the red mark on her cheek already beginning to darken into a bruise. Her lip was split slightly, bleeding. Maria ran cold water over her hands and pressed them against her face, trying to reduce the swelling. But she knew there was no hiding this. People would see. People would ask questions. What would she tell them? The truth? That her boss had hit her. Roberto was right about one thing. Who would believe her? He was connected to the Villa family. He had power, influence, and years of loyalty to the company. She was nobody. Just another worker who could be replaced tomorrow. Maria thought about her children waiting for her at home, about the bills that needed to be paid, about how hard it had been to find this job, and how much harder it would be to find another one if she got fired. But as she stared at her bruised reflection in the mirror, Maria made a decision. She wouldn't forget this. She wouldn't pretend it didn't happen. And she certainly wouldn't let Roberto get away with it. Maybe nobody would believe her. Maybe she would lose her job. Maybe trying to fight back would destroy everything she had left. But if she stayed silent, if she let this violence go unreported, then Roberto would do it again. To her or to someone else. And she couldn't live with that. Maria cleaned herself up as best she could, then left the bathroom. She walked past her section without stopping, ignoring the concerned looks from her workers. She went straight to the HR department on the second floor. The same tired-looking woman who had given Maria her badge on the first day looked up as she entered. Her eyes widened when she saw Maria's face. "I need to file a report," Maria said, her voice surprisingly steady. "I need to report an incident of workplace violence." The woman hesitated, her eyes darting to Maria's bruised cheek and then to the phone on her desk, as if wondering whether to call security. "What happened?" "My manager, Roberto Vasquez, hit me in his office about 20 minutes ago," Maria said. "I want to file a formal complaint." The woman's expression changed. Maria saw pity there and something else, fear maybe, or resignation. "Let me get you the forms," she said quietly. As Maria sat down to fill out the paperwork, her hands still trembling, she wondered if she was doing the right thing. She wondered if this would lead to justice or just to more pain. But she thought about Isabel, crying in that conference room. She thought about Felipe, the old janitor, being humiliated over spilled oil. She thought about all the other workers living in fear every day, and she kept writing. She documented everything that had happened. Every word Roberto had said, the violence he had used. She was as detailed and specific as she could be. When she finished, she signed her name at the bottom of the form and handed it to the HR woman. "What happens now?" Maria asked. The woman looked at the form, then at Maria, then sighed. "Now we wait. The company will investigate. They'll talk to you, to Roberto, to anyone who might have seen or heard something. But I have to be honest with you. These things are complicated. especially when it involves someone with Roberto's connections. Maria nodded. She had expected as much. But at least she had tried. At least she had refused to be silent. She left the HR office and went back to work, finishing out her shift even though her face ached and her spirit felt crushed. When she finally clocked out and left the factory that evening, Maria didn't go straight home. She went to a clinic and had a doctor examine her face. She got the bruising documented, photographed. She got everything in writing. Because Roberto might have power, but Maria had the truth, and she was going to hold on to that truth no matter what came next. 3 days after filing her report, Maria was called into a meeting. Not with HR, not with the company lawyer, with Eduardo Villa himself. Eduardo Villa was the owner of Villa Industries, a man in his late 60s who had built the company from nothing 40 years ago. His name was on the building, on the products, on everything. Meeting him was something most workers never got to do. He existed in a different world, up in his executive offices on the top floor, far removed from the factory floor and the people who actually made his company run. When Maria received the message that Eduardo Villa wanted to see her, she felt a flutter of hope. Maybe this meant something. Maybe the owner taking personal interest in her case meant that justice would actually be served. Maybe someone with real power would finally do something about Roberto. She dressed carefully that morning, wearing her best clothes. She wanted to look professional, credible, strong. Her face still showed signs of bruising, though she had tried to cover it with makeup. The split on her lip had healed, but it was still visible. Maria took the elevator up to the 10th floor, a place she had never been before. The executive offices were completely different from the rest of the factory. Here, everything was clean, quiet, expensive. Thick carpets, original artwork on the walls, large windows with views of the city. It was like stepping into a different world. A secretary led Maria to Eduardo Villa's office. The door was solid mahogany, with the Villa Industries logo engraved in brass. The secretary knocked softly, then opened the door. "Mr. Villa, Maria Torres is here to see you." "Send her in," came a deep voice from inside. Maria entered the office and was immediately struck by its size. It was bigger than her entire apartment. Eduardo Villa sat behind an enormous desk made of dark wood. Behind him, floor-to-ceiling windows showed the city stretching out below. He was a distinguished-looking man with silver hair wearing an expensive suit. He didn't stand when Maria entered, just gestured to a chair in front of his desk. "Sit down, please." Maria sat, feeling small in the large leather chair. Her heart was pounding. This was it. This was the moment that would determine her future. Eduardo picked up a folder from his desk. Maria recognized it. Her complaint, her documentation, everything she had reported about Roberto. "I've read your statement," Eduardo said, his voice neutral. "These are serious accusations." "They're the truth, sir," Maria said. "I wouldn't lie about something like this." Eduardo leaned back in his chair, studying her. "I've known Roberto Vasquez for 15 years. He's been with this company since almost the beginning. He's family to me. His cousin is married to my wife's brother. We spend holidays together. Our children grew up together. Do you understand what I'm saying?" Maria felt her hope beginning to crumble. "Yes, sir, but that doesn't change what happened. Roberto is a passionate man," Eduardo continued as if she hadn't spoken. "He cares deeply about this company. Sometimes his management style can be intense. Some people find it difficult to work with him. But his results are undeniable. His department consistently exceeds production targets. He runs a tight operation." "With all respect, sir, results don't justify violence," Maria said, trying to keep her voice steady. "What he did was wrong. He hit me because I stood up for another worker. That's not passionate management. That's abuse." Eduardo sighed as if Maria was being unreasonable. He opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out a checkbook. "You've been with us 3 months. You're a good worker. Your supervisors before this incident had positive things to say about you. I understand you're a widow with 2 children. That's a difficult situation." Maria watched as he began writing a check and her heart sank even further. "I'm prepared to offer you 3 months of severance pay," Eduardo said. "That's generous considering your short time with the company. You'll also receive a letter of recommendation that should help you find new employment. In exchange, you'll resign from Villa Industries effective immediately and sign a non-disclosure agreement about this incident." Maria stared at the check he was writing. 3 months of salary. It was more money than she had right now. Money that could pay bills, buy food, keep her children safe and warm. But it was also the price of her silence. The cost of letting Roberto get away with what he did. What about Roberto? Maria asked. What consequences will he face? Eduardo looked up from the check. Roberto will be counseled about his management approach. I'll speak with him personally about maintaining professionalism. But as I said, he's been with this company for 15 years. He's family. I'm not going to fire him over one incident, especially when there were no witnesses. There doesn't need to be witnesses, Maria said, feeling anger rising in her chest. Look at my face. Look at the medical report. The doctor documented my injuries. The timeline matches exactly with when I was in Roberto's office. Medical reports can be obtained anywhere, Eduardo said dismissively. They don't prove Roberto was responsible. You could have gotten those injuries any number of ways. Without witnesses or video evidence, this becomes a case of he said, she said, and in those situations, the company must protect its long-term employees. Maria couldn't believe what she was hearing. This man, this powerful man who owned everything, was choosing to protect someone who had committed violence. He was choosing family loyalty over justice. He was choosing convenience over truth. This isn't right, Maria said. You know this isn't right. What I know, Eduardo said, his voice hardening slightly, is that Vila Industries has a reputation to protect. We cannot have employees making allegations against managers without solid proof. It creates chaos, damages morale, and opens us up to lawsuits. The practical solution here is for you to take this very generous severance package and move on with your life. And if I refuse? Maria asked, though she already knew the answer. Eduardo finished writing the check and placed it on the desk between them. Then you will likely find the investigation process very difficult and very slow. Your employment here will become uncomfortable. Your job performance will be scrutinized constantly. Eventually, we will find cause to terminate you without severance, and I can personally assure you that finding another job in this industry will be extremely difficult. I know people in every major manufacturing company in this city. There it was. The real threat underneath the polite words and the generous offer: take the money and disappear, or be destroyed professionally. Be blacklisted, starve. Maria looked at the check. Then she looked at Eduardo Vila, sitting in his expensive suit behind his expensive desk in his expensive office. A man who had everything and was using that power to protect someone who had hurt her, to silence her, to make her and her pain disappear so that his life could continue undisturbed. I need to think about it, Maria said quietly. Of course, Eduardo said, but his tone suggested he expected her to accept. You have until tomorrow to decide. But I should tell you that this offer expires in 24 hours. After that, I cannot guarantee what will happen. Maria stood up, leaving the check on the desk. I'll let you know tomorrow. She walked out of that office, past the secretary, down the elevator, and out of the building. She kept walking until she found a park, and then she sat on a bench and let herself cry. She cried for the injustice of it all, for the realization that power always protects power, for the understanding that men like Roberto could hurt people and face no consequences as long as they knew the right people, for the bitter knowledge that the system wasn't designed to protect people like her. That evening, Maria called her sister again. She explained everything that had happened, the offer Eduardo had made, the choice she had to make. Take the money, Beatriz said immediately. Maria, please. I know it's not fair. I know it's wrong. But you have to think about your children. 3 months of salary is enough to give you time to find another job, to get back on your feet. If you fight this and lose, you'll have nothing. But if I take the money and stay silent, Roberto will do this to someone else, Maria said. Maybe not hitting them, but hurting them in other ways. And nobody will stop him because nobody ever stops him. Is that the world I want my children to grow up in? One where we stay silent about injustice because speaking up is too dangerous? I want to live in a fair world too, Beatriz said gently. But we don't. We live in this world. And in this world, single mothers and widows don't win against powerful men with connections. They just don't. Maria knew her sister was right. Practically speaking, rationally speaking, the smart choice was to take the money, to accept defeat, to survive. But that night, lying in bed, Maria thought about the moment Roberto hit her. She thought about the fear in Isabel's eyes during that meeting. She thought about every worker at Vila Industries who went to work afraid, who suffered in silence, who accepted abuse because they felt powerless to stop it. And she made her decision. The next morning, Maria went back to Eduardo Villa's office. The secretary seemed surprised to see her but let her in. Eduardo was on the phone but ended the call when Maria entered. "Have you made your decision?" he asked. "Yes," Maria said. "I'm not taking the money, and I'm not signing the non-disclosure agreement." Eduardo's expression darkened. "That's a very foolish choice." "Maybe," Maria agreed. "But it's my choice. What Roberto did was wrong. You know it was wrong." Maria left Villa Industries that day and never went back. She didn't officially resign. She didn't give notice. She just left knowing that staying would only lead to more humiliation, more harassment, more pain. For the first few days, she felt a strange sense of freedom. She slept late, spent time with her children, didn't have to worry about Roberto's anger or Eduardo Villa's threats. But reality set in quickly. Money was running out. The severance payment she had refused would have given her 3 months to figure things out. Now she had nothing. She needed to find a job immediately, but that proved harder than she had expected. Maria started applying everywhere: factories, warehouses, retail stores, restaurants, anywhere that was hiring. She dropped off her resume at dozens of places. She followed up with phone calls. She went to interviews whenever she could get them, but something strange kept happening. She would go to an interview, everything would seem to go well, and then she would never hear back. Or she would hear back with a vague explanation about finding someone with more experience, someone who was a better fit. After 3 weeks of this, Maria started to suspect the truth. Eduardo Villa had made good on his threat. Somehow word had gotten out about her, about the complaint she filed, about her refusal to stay silent. In the tight manufacturing community, reputation mattered, and somehow she had been labeled a troublemaker. She tried applying outside the manufacturing industry, but without relevant experience, nobody wanted to hire her. She was overqualified for some positions, underqualified for others. Always there was a reason, an excuse, a polite rejection. The bills started piling up again just like after Carlos died. First, she fell behind on the electric bill, then the water, then the rent. Her landlord, who had been patient during her husband's death, was less understanding this time. "I'm sorry about your situation," he said when he came to collect the rent for the 3rd month in a row. "But I have bills too. If you can't pay by the end of next week, I'll have to start eviction proceedings." Maria tried to explain, tried to ask for more time, but she could see it in his eyes. He had heard enough excuses. He wanted his money or he wanted her out. She started selling things. First small items she didn't need, then things she did need. Her wedding ring brought in some money, though selling it felt like losing Carlos all over again. She sold the television, some furniture, clothes, anything that had value. Each sale felt like another piece of her life being stripped away. Her children noticed the changes. Her daughter asked why they were eating rice and beans every day. Her son asked why they couldn't turn on the heater even though it was getting cold. Maria tried to explain in ways they would understand, but how do you tell your children that the world isn't fair? That doing the right thing sometimes has terrible consequences? One night, about 6 weeks after leaving Villa Industries, Maria sat at her small kitchen table going through bills. The math wasn't working. No matter how many times she added and subtracted, cut and reorganized, there simply wasn't enough money. She was drowning and she couldn't see any way to shore. Her sister Beatrice came over that evening and found Maria crying at the table, papers spread everywhere. "Let me help you," Beatrice said. "Please, I can loan you some money. Not a lot, but enough to buy some time." "You have your own family to take care of," Maria said. "I can't take your money. You're my sister." "Your family too." Beatrice sat down across from her. "But Maria, I have to ask, why didn't you just take Eduardo Villa's offer? I know you wanted to do the right thing, but look where it's gotten you. You're about to lose your apartment. Your kids are suffering. Was it really worth it?" Maria had asked herself that question every day. Every time she couldn't afford something her children needed. Every time she had to water down the soup to make it last another day. Every time she saw fear in her children's eyes. "I don't know anymore," Maria admitted. "I thought standing up would matter. I thought telling the truth would mean something. But nobody cared. The labor board said they can't do anything without more evidence. Every lawyer I talked to said the case is too weak, that Villa has too much money and power. I did everything right and it didn't matter. So what are you going to do?" Beatrice asked gently. "I don't know," Maria whispered. "I really don't know." The next few weeks were the darkest of Maria's life. She was officially served with eviction papers. She had 30 days to find somewhere else to live, or the sheriff would remove them by force. She went to local charities and assistance programs, but there were so many people who needed help, and resources were limited. Her children's school called, concerned about unpaid lunch fees and asking if everything was okay at home. Maria felt humiliated having to admit that no, everything was not okay, that she couldn't even afford to feed her children lunch at school. She started having panic attacks. They would come suddenly, without warning. Her chest would tighten. Her breathing would become rapid and shallow. Her heart would race like it was trying to escape her body. The first time it happened, she thought she was having a heart attack. But the free clinic doctor explained it was anxiety, stress, the physical manifestation of her overwhelmed mind. Depression crept in slowly, then all at once. Some mornings Maria couldn't get out of bed. The weight of everything was too much. Her children would have to wake her up, asking for breakfast, asking what they should wear, asking the 100 small questions children ask. And Maria would force herself up, force herself to function even though every movement felt like pushing through concrete. She stopped calling friends, stopped answering calls from people who wanted to check on her. She was ashamed of her situation, ashamed that she had brought this on herself and her children. If she had just taken the money, if she had just stayed quiet, if she had just been practical instead of principled. One particularly low night, Maria sat in her darkened apartment after putting the kids to bed. She had exactly $37 to her name. In 3 days they would be evicted. She had nowhere to go except maybe Beatrice's small apartment, but her sister already had 3 kids in a 2-bedroom place. There was no room. Maria thought about Carlos, about how he had always been the strong one, the one who fixed problems. She wondered what he would think of her now. Would he be proud that she had stood up for what was right? Or would he be disappointed that she had put their children in danger by refusing a lifeline? She thought about Roberto, probably sleeping peacefully in his nice house, probably never thinking about her or what he had done. She thought about Eduardo Villa in his mansion, his life completely unaffected by her pain. They had moved on as if she never existed, as if her suffering meant nothing, and maybe it didn't. Maybe that was the hardest truth of all, that her pain, her struggle, her sacrifice meant nothing in the larger world, that she had given up everything for a principle, and the world had simply shrugged and moved on. Maria went to the bathroom and looked at herself in the mirror. She barely recognized the woman staring back. The bruises on her face had healed, but new wounds had appeared. Dark circles under her eyes, cheekbones too prominent from skipped meals, hair that needed cutting, but that was a luxury she couldn't afford. She looked haunted. She looked defeated. "I'm sorry," she whispered to her reflection, to Carlos, to her children, to herself. "I'm so sorry." But even in her darkest moment, even when she wanted to give up completely, something stubborn remained inside Maria. Maybe it was the memory of Isabel's grateful squeeze of her hand. Maybe it was the thought of all the other workers still suffering under Roberto's cruelty. Maybe it was just the basic human instinct to survive. Whatever it was, it kept Maria going. One more day, one more hour, one more breath. She didn't know it yet, but her story wasn't over. The rock bottom she had hit was about to become the foundation for something new. Sometimes we have to lose everything before we can find out who we really are. Sometimes we have to fall apart before we can rebuild ourselves stronger. Maria's breaking was about to become her making. She just couldn't see it yet through the darkness. But dawn was coming. It was still far away, still hidden beyond the horizon, but it was coming. She just had to survive long enough to see it. The turning point came from an unexpected place. Maria had moved into her sister's apartment, cramming her 2 children into an already crowded space. It was temporary, Beatrice kept saying, just until Maria got back on her feet. But Maria wondered if she would ever get back on her feet, or if she would just keep falling. She was sitting in the living room one afternoon, looking through job listings on an old laptop Beatrice had let her borrow, when her sister came home with a flyer. "I saw this at the community center," Beatrice said, handing it to Maria. "I don't know if you'd be interested, but maybe it could help." The flyer was for a support group, workplace abuse survivors, it read in simple letters. "You are not alone. Share your story in a safe, confidential space, every Thursday evening at St. Teresa's Community Center." Maria's first instinct was to throw it away. She didn't want to sit in a circle with strangers and talk about her problems. She didn't want pity or sympathy. She didn't want to be seen as a victim, but Beatrice was watching her with hopeful eyes. "Just try it once," her sister said. "What do you have to lose?" The next Thursday evening, Maria found herself walking into a small room in the back of the community center. Folding chairs were arranged in a circle. A woman with kind eyes and gray hair greeted her at the door. "I'm Patricia," she said, shaking Maria's hand. "I'm one of the group facilitators." "Is this your first time?" Maria nodded, suddenly feeling nervous. "I don't know if I should be here. My situation is probably not as bad as other people's." Patricia smiled gently. "Pain is pain. Suffering is suffering. You don't have to compare your experience to anyone else's. You're welcome here." There were 7 women in the group that night. Each of them had a story. Each of them had been hurt by people with power in their workplaces. As Maria listened to them share, something inside her began to shift. There was Rosa, who had been harassed by her supervisor for years. When she finally reported him, she was the one who got fired. There was Carmen, who had been injured on the job because her boss refused to fix unsafe equipment. The company had fought her workers' compensation claim for 3 years. There was Diana, who had tried to organize a union and was blacklisted from every job in her field. Each story was different, but they all had the same themes: power, abuse, injustice, and the terrible cost of speaking up. When it was Maria's turn to speak, she hesitated. She hadn't told her full story to anyone except her sister and the HR department at Villa Industries. But looking around at these women, at their understanding faces, she felt safe for the first time in months. She started talking. About Roberto, about the violence, about Eduardo Villa's betrayal, about losing her job, her savings, her home, about feeling like she had destroyed her children's lives by refusing to stay silent. As she spoke, tears streamed down her face. She cried for everything she had lost, but also for the release of finally being heard. When she finished, there was a moment of silence. Then Rosa reached over and took her hand. "You did the right thing," Rosa said firmly. "I know it doesn't feel like it. I know it's cost you everything. But you did the right thing." "But look where it got me," Maria said. "I'm homeless. I can't find work. My kids are suffering." "How is that right?" "Because if you had stayed silent, Roberto would have hurt someone else," Carmen said. "And that person might not have been as strong as you. They might not have survived it." "Also," Diana added, "your story isn't over yet. Mine wasn't either. I thought getting blacklisted was the end. But then I found this group. I found other people fighting the same fights. And together we started making changes. Small ones, yeah, but changes. We helped pass a new city ordinance protecting workers who report violations. We got 3 people their jobs back through legal action. We're still fighting," Patricia spoke up. "Maria, have you documented everything that happened to you?" "I have the medical records," Maria said, "and the complaint I filed with HR. But I don't have witnesses or video or anything that would actually prove what Roberto did." "What about other victims?" Patricia asked. "You said Roberto has been doing this for years. There must be other people he's hurt." Maria thought about it. She thought about Isabel, about Felipe, about all the workers she had seen Roberto terrorize. There are others, but they're all afraid. They all need their jobs. Fear is a powerful weapon, Patricia agreed. But you know what's more powerful? Numbers. One person speaking up can be dismissed. But multiple voices, multiple stories, multiple witnesses, that's much harder to ignore. Over the following weeks, Maria kept attending the group. She found strength in the other women, in their stories and their survival. She found purpose in helping others who were going through similar situations. When new members came, scared and broken, Maria was there to listen and encourage. Slowly, Maria started documenting her story in detail. Not just the incident with Roberto, but everything. The culture of fear at Villa Industries, the pattern of abuse, the way the company protected powerful employees while discarding those who spoke up. She wrote it all down, dates and times and specific incidents, creating a timeline of everything she had witnessed and experienced. Patricia connected her with a social worker who specialized in workplace abuse cases. The social worker helped Maria navigate the complex system of labor laws and worker protections. She explained that while Maria's individual case might be hard to prove, a pattern of abuse involving multiple victims would be much stronger. The problem is getting people to come forward, the social worker said. Most victims are too afraid. They're afraid of retaliation, of losing their jobs, of being labeled troublemakers. I was afraid too, Maria admitted, but I was more afraid of staying silent. One evening, about 4 months after leaving Villa Industries, Maria got an unexpected phone call. It was Isabel, the young mother she had defended in that meeting. Maria? Isabel's voice was shaking. I heard about what happened to you. About Roberto hitting you and the company protecting him. I'm so sorry. It's not your fault, Maria said. How are you? How's your daughter? She's better, thank you. But Maria, I need to tell you something. Roberto has gotten worse since you left. Much worse. He's targeting anyone who talks about you or what happened. Last week he made a woman cry for 30 minutes straight over a minor mistake. Yesterday he threw a tool that almost hit someone. People are terrified. Maria felt anger rising in her chest. Has anyone reported him? Everyone's too scared. But Maria, I want to help you. If you're still trying to hold him accountable, I'll testify. I'll tell them what I saw, what I've experienced. I can't stay silent anymore either. Maria's heart began to race. Isabel, are you sure? You could lose your job. I'm already losing myself, Isabel said. Every day I go to work afraid. Every day I watch people suffer. I have a daughter. What kind of example am I setting for her if I don't stand up when something is wrong? After that call, something shifted. Maria reached out to other former co-workers carefully, cautiously. She explained what she was trying to do. Not everyone wanted to help. Many were still too afraid. But slowly, a few brave souls came forward. First Isabel, then Felipe, the elderly janitor, then 2 other women who had left Villa Industries under suspicious circumstances. Each person had a story. Each story added to the picture of a toxic workplace culture, enabled by management and protected by ownership. Together, their voices created something powerful, something that couldn't be easily dismissed or ignored. Around this same time, a local journalist named Antonio Reyes was working on a story about workplace abuse in the manufacturing sector. He had heard about Maria's case through the support group network. He reached out asking if she would be willing to talk to him. Maria was hesitant at first. She had learned not to trust systems, not to believe that anyone with power would actually help. But Antonio was different. He was young, passionate, and genuinely angry about the injustices he was uncovering. He had been investigating Villa Industries for months after receiving tips about unsafe working conditions and management abuse. Your story could be the key, Antonio said when they met at a coffee shop. I have other sources, other complaints about Villa Industries, but most people won't go on record. They're too afraid. If you're willing to tell your story publicly, with your name attached, it could encourage others to come forward. And if nobody else comes forward? Maria asked. Then I'm just one woman making accusations against a powerful company. Again. Then you're one woman brave enough to tell the truth, Antonio said. And sometimes that's how change starts. One person refusing to be silent. Maria thought about her children, about the example she was setting, about what kind of world she wanted them to grow up in. A world where people stayed silent about injustice because speaking up was too dangerous? Or a world where people fought back, even when it was hard, even when it was costly? Okay, Maria finally said. I'll do it. I'll tell my story. That night, Maria sat down with Antonio for hours. She told him everything. He recorded her testimony, took notes, gathered documentation. He was thorough and professional, and for the first time since Roberto hit her, Maria felt like someone was actually listening. Really listening. This is going to take some time to put together, Antonio said as they finished. I need to verify everything, talk to other sources. The article published on a Tuesday morning, Antonio had titled it, The Hidden Cost of Manufacturing. How One Woman's Stand Against Workplace Violence Revealed a System of Abuse. Maria's story was at the center, but Antonio had done more than just tell her tale. He had uncovered a pattern. 5 other women had come forward, each with their own experiences of abuse, harassment, and retaliation at Villa Industries. He had documented safety violations, illegal labor practices, and a culture of fear that had existed for years. The article included Maria's photo. She had debated whether to allow that, knowing it would make her even more visible, more vulnerable. But in the end, she decided that hiding felt like shame, and she had nothing to be ashamed of. The woman in the photo looked directly at the camera, her face serious, her eyes determined. She looked like someone who had survived something terrible and refused to let it break her. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The article was shared thousands of times on social media within the first few hours. People were outraged. Comments poured in from current and former Villa Industries employees, many sharing their own stories of abuse and mistreatment. The floodgates had opened. By Wednesday morning, a protest had organized outside Villa Industries. About 50 people showed up holding signs that read, "Justice for Maria" and "Stop Workplace Violence" and "Workers are People." Local news cameras arrived, interviewing protesters, filming the scene. Maria watched the news coverage from her sister's apartment, hardly able to believe what she was seeing. Her story, her pain, had sparked something real. She wasn't alone anymore. All these people standing in the cold, demanding change. By Thursday, the story had been picked up by national news outlets. Workplace abuse was suddenly a hot topic. Other victims from other companies started sharing their stories. Maria's experience became part of a larger conversation about power, accountability, and the need for stronger worker protections. Eduardo Villa issued a statement through the company's lawyer, denying all allegations and threatening to sue for defamation. Villa Industries maintains the highest standards of workplace safety and employee treatment. These accusations are baseless and appear to be coordinated attacks designed to damage the company's reputation. But the statement only made things worse. More people came forward. Former employees, current employees who finally felt safe speaking up, suppliers who had witnessed inappropriate behavior. The trickle became a flood. The State Labor Department announced they would be conducting a formal investigation into Villa Industries. Multiple agencies got involved. OSHA sent inspectors. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission opened cases. What had started as one woman's complaint had become a full-scale regulatory investigation. Within 2 weeks, Roberto Vasquez was arrested. The charges included assault and battery. The prosecutor's office had built a case not just on Maria's testimony, but on the testimonies of other victims who had finally found the courage to speak up. 2 other women came forward claiming Roberto had physically assaulted them as well. The pattern was undeniable. Maria was at the community center with her support group when she got the news. Patricia showed her the alert on her phone. "He's been arrested," she said simply. For a moment, Maria couldn't breathe. Then tears came, but they were different from all the tears she had cried before. These were tears of relief, of validation, of justice finally catching up to someone who had hurt so many people. "You did this," Rosa said, hugging Maria tightly. "Your courage did this." "We all did this," Maria corrected. Everyone who spoke up. Everyone who refused to stay silent. The arrest made national headlines. Videos of Roberto being led out of Villa Industries in handcuffs went viral. People who had never heard of Maria or Villa Industries suddenly knew the story. Comment sections filled with people sharing their own experiences of workplace abuse, creating a massive online conversation about the need for change. Eduardo Villa faced a different kind of reckoning. Investors started asking questions. The company's stock price dropped. Major clients began reviewing their contracts, concerned about being associated with Villa Industries. The board of directors called an emergency meeting. 3 weeks after the article published, Eduardo Villa held a press conference. He looked older, tired, his usual confidence shaken. He announced that Villa Industries would be implementing comprehensive reforms, new reporting systems for complaints, mandatory management training, an independent oversight committee. He announced his intention to step back from day-to-day operations, but he never apologized to Maria. He never acknowledged that he had protected Roberto. He never admitted that the company's culture had allowed abuse to flourish for years. His statement was full of corporate language about moving forward and lessons learned, but empty of any real accountability. Still, it was something. The reforms would make a difference for future workers even if they couldn't undo the past. The legal battles dragged on for months. Roberto's trial date was set. Eduardo Villa and Villa Industries faced multiple lawsuits from current and former employees. The state investigation uncovered dozens of violations that resulted in substantial fines. For Maria, life slowly began to stabilize. Antonio's article had made her story public, but it also connected her with resources she didn't know existed. A workers' rights organization reached out, offering her a position as a victim advocate. They wanted someone who understood the system from the inside, who could help other workers navigate complaints and support them through the process. The job didn't pay as much as Villa Industries had, but it was meaningful work. Maria found purpose in helping others, in using her painful experience to make things better for people who were going through similar situations. Every person she helped file a complaint, every worker she supported through an investigation, felt like another step toward healing. She was able to move out of her sister's apartment and into a small place of her own. Nothing fancy, but it was hers. Her children had their own room again. They could afford heat and regular meals. Slowly, the constant anxiety that had gripped Maria for months began to ease. The support group remained an important part of her life. She continued attending meetings, now as much to give support as to receive it. When new members came scared and broken like she had been, Maria shared her story. Not to say it would be easy, but to show them that survival was possible, that speaking up mattered, that they weren't alone. 6 months after the article published, Roberto's trial began. Maria had to testify, facing him in court for the first time since that day in his office. She was terrified walking into that courtroom, her hands shaking, her heart racing. But when she sat on the witness stand and told her story under oath, she felt strong. Roberto's lawyer tried to discredit her, suggesting she was lying for attention or money. But the prosecutor had built a solid case. Medical records, other victims, a pattern of behavior that was impossible to deny. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning with a guilty verdict. Roberto was sentenced to 18 months in prison and ordered to complete anger management counseling. It wasn't as much as Maria had hoped for, but it was more than she had thought possible 6 months ago. And most importantly, it was accountability. Roberto would face consequences for his actions. His victims were believed. Maria walked out of that courthouse feeling lighter than she had in a year. Justice wasn't perfect. The system was still broken in many ways. But in this moment, for this case, truth had won out over power. The day after the verdict, Maria took her children to the park. They played on the swings, laughing and happy in a way they hadn't been in so long. Her daughter ran up to her, face flushed from running. "Mama, you look happy," she said. Maria pulled her daughter close, then called her son over for a hug. "I am happy, baby. Things have been hard, but they're getting better. And I want you both to know something important." Her children looked up at her with curious eyes. Sometimes in life you have to stand up for what's right, even when it's scary, even when it costs you something. Your father taught me that, and I hope I've taught you that too. We don't stay silent when we see someone being hurt. We don't look away from injustice. We speak up even when our voice shakes, okay? "Okay, Mama," her son said seriously. "Will speaking up always make things better?" her daughter asked. Maria thought about how to answer that. Not always right away. Sometimes it makes things harder first. But speaking up means you're being true to yourself. It means you're trying to make the world a little bit better. And that always matters, even if we don't see the results immediately. Over the following months, the changes at Villa Industries began to take hold. New management was brought in. Workers reported feeling safer speaking up about problems. The culture slowly started to shift. It wasn't perfect and it wouldn't happen overnight, but it was progress. Maria's story became part of a larger movement for workplace safety and worker rights. She was invited to speak at conferences, at worker meetings, at universities. She told her story not because she enjoyed reliving the pain, but because she knew it could help others. Every time someone came up to her after a speech and said, "Thank you, I needed to hear that," or "Your story gave me courage to report what happened to me," Maria knew her suffering hadn't been meaningless.